The Challenge of Impossibility. The Grand Lecture Hall of the Interstellar Science Academy buzzed with anticipation. Professor Xin Valerius, the most renowned xenobiologist in the Galactic Confederation, stood at the podium, his 8-fingered hands clasped together with an air of absolute certainty. His iridescent blue skin shimmered under the holographic lights, a testament to his species' evolutionary perfection. Ladies, gentlemen, and sentient beings of various configurations, Chin began, his voice a melodious blend of harmonics that could simultaneously communicate with multiple species. I am here to discuss the ultimate challenge of planetary survival. The holographic display behind him flickered to life, showing a planet so desolate it seemed to challenge the very concept of life. Barren rock stretched across a landscape of impossible extremes. Temperatures that could vaporize water in seconds, radiation levels that would obliterate most known cellular structures, and an atmosphere so thin it was practically a vacuum. Planet Xerxes 9, Sin declared, is the ultimate crucible of survival. No species in the known galaxy has ever survived more than 72 standard hours on its surface. The combination of extreme radiation, temperature fluctuations, and complete lack of water makes it the most inhospitable environment ever documented. A ripple of murmurs passed through the audience. Representatives from thousands of different species leaned forward, some with multiple eyes, others with sensory appendages that quivered with curiosity. At the back of the hall, almost unnoticed, sat Dr. Elena Rodriguez. Her dark eyes were fixed on the holographic display, a slight smile playing on her lips. She was different from the other scientists, a human, often overlooked, but possessing a quiet determination that burned far more intensely than the most impressive alien physiology. As Sin continued his lecture, detailing the planet's impossible conditions, Elena's mind was already racing. She had spent years studying extreme environments, developing technologies that pushed the boundaries of human survival. Xerxes 9 was more than a challenge. It was an opportunity. When the lecture concluded, most of the audience dispersed quickly, but Elena approached the podium, her movements deliberate and confident. "Professor Valerius," she called out, her voice cutting through the remaining background chatter. Sin turned, his multiple eyes focusing on the human with a mixture of curiosity and mild condescension. Humans were still considered a relatively young species in the Galactic Confederation, technologically promising, but lacking the sophisticated evolutionary adaptations of more established civilizations. "Dr. Rodriguez," he acknowledged, his translator rendering his complex language into crisp English, "I assume you're here to challenge my conclusions." Elena smiled. It was not a smile of aggression, but of pure scientific enthusiasm. "Not challenge, Professor. Prove." For a moment, Sin's complex facial muscles did something approximating a human expression of surprise. "Prove. You intend to send a team to Xerxes 9. "Exactly," Elena responded. "A small, carefully selected human team. We'll demonstrate that survival is about more than physical adaptation. It's about intelligence, innovation, and an unwavering will to overcome." The next week was a blur of preparation. Elena hand-picked her team with the precision of a master strategist. First was Dr. Kai Chen, a quantum environmental engineer whose adaptive technology had already revolutionized human space exploration. Then came Captain Amara Okonkwo, a military survival specialist who had spent years in Earth's most extreme training environments. Rounding out the team was Dr. Rafael Martinez, a biochemist specializing in cellular regeneration and extreme environment adaptation. Their equipment was revolutionary, nano-adaptive environmental suits that could reconfigure molecular structures in real time, providing protection against radiation, temperature, and pressure changes. Compact water generation systems that could extract moisture from the most minute environmental traces. Portable energy generators that could convert the planet's harsh radiation into usable power. The day of departure arrived. The Interstellar Science Academy's Observation Committee watched with a mix of scientific curiosity and barely concealed skepticism. Professor Xin stood at the front, his multiple eyes tracking every movement. "You have one planetary rotation," he announced formally. 72 standard hours. After that, we will retrieve what remains of your team. Elena's response was a calm, confident smile. "We'll be in touch, Professor." Arrival and first challenges. The descent onto Xerxes 9 was nothing like any of them had imagined. As their specialized vessel breached the planet's turbulent atmosphere, the ship's advanced sensors began screaming warnings. Radiation levels spiked beyond predicted models, and temperature fluctuations created violent wind currents that threatened to tear their craft apart. "Stabilizing navigation," Captain Amara Okonkwo called out, her hands dancing across the control panel with practiced precision. Her military training kicked in, transforming potential panic into calculated action. "Kai, I need those adaptive shields at maximum." Dr. Kai Chen was already working, his fingers flying over a holographic interface. Quantum algorithms adjusted the ship's molecular structure in real time, creating a protective bubble that could withstand the planet's brutal environmental assault. "Shields at 87% capacity and holding," he reported, a thin sheen of sweat forming on his forehead. "But we're burning through our primary energy reserves faster than anticipated." Elena watched the external view, her scientific mind racing. Xerxes 9 was more than just inhospitable. It was actively hostile. The planet's surface looked like a nightmare of razor-sharp rock formations and dust storms that seemed to move with an almost intelligent malevolence. "Prepare for landing sequence," she commanded. "Rafael, run a final check on our environmental suits." Dr. Rafael Martinez was already running a comprehensive diagnostic. His biochemical expertise had designed suits that were more than simple protective gear. They were adaptive ecosystems, capable of generating their own oxygen, filtering radiation, and even repairing minor cellular damage. The landing was anything but smooth. Violent winds buffeted their craft, and the ground seemed to shift and change with each passing second. When they finally touched down, the silence was more terrifying than the descent. "External temperature, 78 degrees Celsius and rising," Kai announced. "Radiation levels are off our previous charts. Our suits are filtering, but prolonged exposure will be problematic." Elena stepped forward, activating the airlock's secondary protocols. "We knew this wouldn't be easy," she said, her voice calm but charged with determination. "Our first priority is establishing a base camp and understanding the immediate environment." As the airlock opened, the true brutality of Xerxes 9 revealed itself. The landscape was a hellscape of razor-sharp, obsidian-like rocks and dust that seemed to move with a life of its own. The sky was a sick combination of deep crimson and burnt orange, with radiation creating bizarre light refractions that played tricks on the eyes. "Incredible," Raphael muttered, his scientific curiosity overriding any sense of fear. He was already collecting samples, his specialized collection tools extracting minute particles from the surrounding environment. "The geological composition is unlike anything we've ever seen. These rock formations, they're not just passive structures. They're changing." Amara had already set up a defensive perimeter, her military training transforming their landing site into a secure base camp. Portable energy shields flickered to life, creating a bubble of relative safety in the midst of the planetary chaos. "We got about 12 hours of optimal suit protection," Kai announced. "After that, we'll need to find a way to either recharge or create alternative protective measures." Their first challenge came sooner than expected. What initially looked like a simple dust storm quickly transformed into something far more dangerous. The dust wasn't just dust. It was a complex mixture of microscopic crystalline structures that seemed to have an almost predatory nature. "Those particles," Raphael called out, his voice tight with excitement and concern. "They're not just environmental debris. They're responding to our presence. Look." The dust was indeed moving differently near their base camp. Where it should have been randomly dispersed by wind, it was forming complex patterns, almost like a living organism testing the boundaries of their protective shield. "Adaptive environmental response," Elena muttered. The planet is studying us. As night fell, if one could call the bizarre light changes on Xerxes 9 a night, the team huddled in their temporary shelter. The sounds outside were unlike anything they had ever experienced. Shifting rocks, strange electromagnetic pulses, and a constant low-frequency hum that seemed to penetrate their very bones. "We're going to need to modify our approach," Elena said, spreading out a holographic map of their immediate surroundings. "This isn't just about survival. This is about understanding a completely alien ecosystem." Kai looked up from his monitoring equipment. "We've got less than 48 hours before our primary systems begin to fail. We need a breakthrough, and we need it fast." Outside their shelter, Xerxes 9 continued its relentless assault. But inside, 4 humans, representatives of a species that had conquered every environment on their home planet, were just getting started. The real challenge was about to begin: adaptation and discovery. The third day on Xerxes 9 brought a revelation that would challenge everything they knew about planetary survival. As dawn broke, a term used loosely on this bizarre world, Elena and her team discovered that the planet was far more complex than any of their initial scans had suggested. "These molecular structures are impossible," Raphael muttered, his holographic display dancing with intricate patterns. The rock samples they'd collected were not just geological formations. They were exhibiting properties that defied conventional scientific understanding. Kai Chen leaned in, his quantum engineering background giving him a unique perspective. "Look at the molecular bonding," he pointed out. "These rocks aren't just passive. They're adaptive, almost like a living network." Captain Amara Okonkwo stood guard, her military background making her instinctively scan the horizon. The landscape seemed to shimmer and change, with rock formations that looked slightly different each time she blinked. "We're being watched," she said quietly, "or studied." Elena's mind raced. Their original mission wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about understanding a planetary ecosystem that challenged the very foundations of their scientific knowledge. Their breakthrough came unexpectedly. As Raphael analyzed a particularly strange rock sample, he noticed something extraordinary. The crystalline structure was responding to their body heat, creating microscopic channels that seemed to collect and redirect moisture. "It's a survival mechanism," Elena realized. "The planet isn't just hostile. It's adaptive." Their suit's energy reserves were running critically low. Kai's quantum adaptive technology was their last line of defense, but even that was being pushed to its limits. The constant radiation and bizarre molecular interactions were wearing down their protective systems faster than anticipated. "We need to think differently," Elena declared. "Our technology isn't conquering this environment. We need to work with it." Their first true test came with water, or the lack thereof. Traditional water collection methods were useless on Xerxes 9, but Raphael's discovery of the rock's moisture channeling properties gave them an idea. Using Kai's quantum engineering and Raphael's biochemical expertise, they began to modify their equipment. Instead of fighting the planet's unique properties, they would use them. Amara set up a series of collection points, using the rock formations themselves as a complex water harvesting system. The crystalline structures, which initially seemed hostile, became their greatest asset. Microscopic channels began to form, redirecting the planet's minimal moisture into collectible reservoirs. "It's like the planet is teaching us," Kai said in wonder. Each of these rock formations is a complex water management system. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. But survival was only part of the challenge. As they worked, strange energy signatures began to appear on their scanners. The planet itself seemed to be responding to their presence, not with hostility, but with a kind of curious intelligence. "These energy patterns," Raphael called out, "they're not random. They're communicating." Elena's scientific mind was racing. Communicating how? With what? Before they could fully investigate, a massive environmental shift began. The ground beneath them started to change, rock formations slowly realigning themselves. It wasn't a threat. It was more like an invitation. "We're being guided," Amara said, her military training giving way to a sense of wonder. "The planet wants us to go somewhere." Their modified water collection system was working, but their suit's energy reserves were critically low. They would need to make a decision soon: adapt completely or retreat. Alina looked at her team. They had come to prove that humans could survive on the most impossible planet in the known galaxy. But now, they were discovering something far more profound. Xerxes 9 wasn't just a planet to be conquered. It was a living, breathing ecosystem that challenged everything they understood about life itself. "Prepare for the next phase," she told her team. "We're not just surviving anymore. We're about to make first contact with a planet that's alive." As the bizarre light of Xerxes 9 shifted around them, the four humans stood at the precipice of the greatest scientific discovery in human history. They had come to prove they could survive. They were about to prove they could understand the hidden ecosystem. The transformation of Xerxes 9 happened gradually, yet with a speed that defied conventional scientific understanding. What had initially appeared as a dead, hostile environment was revealing itself to be a complex, living system that responded to their presence with an almost sentient intelligence. "The rock formations are creating pathways," Kai reported, his quantum sensors working overtime to capture the intricate changes. "It's like the entire planetary surface is reconfiguring itself around us." Elena stood at the center of their modified base camp, watching in awe as the landscape shifted. The razor-sharp obsidian-like rocks were now forming smoother passages, creating channels that seemed to guide their movement. What was once a brutal, impassable terrain was transforming into something that almost resembled a navigable landscape. Raphael was beside himself with scientific excitement. "These molecular restructuring abilities are beyond anything in our current understanding," he said, his holographic displays showing the continuous changes. "The planet isn't just adapting, it's communicating." Captain Amara Okonkwo remained vigilant, her military training keeping her focused despite the incredible phenomena surrounding them. "Communicating how?" she asked, her hand instinctively close to her advanced scanning equipment. Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them began to pulse with a soft, rhythmic energy. It wasn't a threat, more like a heartbeat. "Energy signatures are increasing," Kai announced. "But it's not radiation. It's something else, almost like a massive neural network." Elena's mind raced. They had come to prove human survival on an impossible planet. Now they were discovering something far more profound. A planetary ecosystem that challenged everything humanity knew about life, intelligence, and adaptation. A sudden shift in the terrain created a natural cavern, its walls lined with the same adaptive crystalline structures they had observed earlier. The team exchanged glances, an unspoken agreement to investigate. As they entered the cavern, the true complexity of Xerxes 9 revealed itself. The walls pulsed with soft, bioluminescent energy. Microscopic channels moved moisture and energy in patterns that resembled nothing so much as a living circulatory system. "This isn't just a planet," Raphael whispered. "This is an organism." Their suit sensors went into overdrive. The cavern was filled with complex molecular structures that defied traditional classification. Part geological, part biological, the environment around them was a complex network of energy, matter, and something that approached consciousness. Amara's military training kicked in. "We need to document everything," she said, her advanced recording equipment capturing every microscopic detail. Kai's quantum sensors began to pick up something extraordinary. "These energy patterns," he said, "they're responding to our presence. Not just reacting, responding. It's like the planet is trying to communicate." Elena realized they were at the precipice of the most significant scientific discovery in human history. Xerxes 9 wasn't just a planet that could be survived. It was a living, thinking entity that was as curious about them as they were about it. "We're not conquerors," she said softly. "We're explorers, and we're being invited to understand." The cavern walls began to shift, creating complex geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with an internal logic. Microscopic channels moved, reformed, and adapted with each movement of the team. "It's learning from us," Raphael said in wonder, "just as we're learning from it." Their suit's energy reserves, which had been critically low, suddenly began to stabilize. The planet was providing energy, moisture, protection, everything they needed to survive. But survival was no longer the goal. They were on the brink of a discovery that would reshape humanity's understanding of life itself. As the bioluminescent walls of the cavern continued to pulse and shift, Alina and her team stood at the center of a living, breathing planetary intelligence. They had come to prove that humans could survive the impossible. They were about to prove that humans could understand the unimaginable. The true mission of Xerxes 9 was just beginning. Triumph of human resilience. The final stages of their mission on Xerxes 9 would become the stuff of scientific legend. What had begun as a challenge to survive had transformed into humanity's most profound encounter with planetary intelligence. The cavern that had once seemed alien and threatening now pulsed with a rhythmic energy that felt almost welcoming. Alina realized they were no longer just observers. They had become participants in a complex, living system. "It's responding to our cognitive patterns," Kai said, his quantum sensors tracking the intricate molecular dance around them. "The planet, or whatever this is learning from our thought processes." Raphael's biochemical analysis revealed something extraordinary. The crystalline structures that lined the cavern walls were not just adaptive. They were a form of distributed intelligence, collecting and processing information in ways that defied traditional understanding of life itself. Captain Amara Okonkwo, typically focused on tactical considerations, found herself overwhelmed by the sheer wonder of their discovery. "We're not just surviving," she said quietly. "We're communicating." The planet, or organism, began to reveal its true nature. What had initially appeared as hostile environmental conditions were actually sophisticated defense mechanisms. The brutal radiation, the shifting landscapes, the complex molecular structures, all were part of an incredibly advanced system of protection and communication. Suddenly, the cavern walls began to transform. Intricate patterns emerged, forming what could only be described as a three-dimensional representation of the team's collective knowledge. Memories, scientific understanding, human experiences, all were being reflected back to them in a mesmerizing display of light and molecular restructuring. "It's creating a map," Alina realized, "not just of our physical presence, but of our collective understanding." Their suits, which had been on the brink of failure, now functioned perfectly. The planet was providing energy, protection, and something more, a form of symbiotic support that challenged everything they understood about survival. As the final hours of their mission approached, the team faced a decision that would change human scientific understanding forever. They had proven they could survive on Xerxes 9, but they had discovered something far more important, a form of planetary intelligence that was as curious about them as they were about it. "We can't just leave," Raphael said, his voice a mixture of scientific excitement and deep respect. "We've established first contact with an entirely new form of life." Kai's quantum sensors were working overtime, capturing every microscopic detail of their interaction. "It's offering us a choice," he said softly, "to stay, to learn, to understand." Alina looked at her team, each of them representing the best of human potential: curiosity, adaptability, the unbreakable spirit to understand the unknown. Back on the Galactic Confederation's scientific base, Professor Xin Valerius watched the live data stream with mounting disbelief. The team he had dismissed as certain to fail was not just surviving. They were rewriting the fundamental understanding of planetary life. As the planet's bioluminescent walls continued to pulse, Alina made their final transmission. "This is not a conquest," she reported. "This is an invitation to understand. Xerxes 9 is alive, and it wants to communicate." Their mission had begun as a challenge to survive the impossible. It was ending as humanity's most significant scientific discovery. The four humans stood at the center of a living planetary intelligence, having proven that human resilience was about more than survival. It was about understanding, adaptation, and the endless potential of curiosity. Xerxes 9 was no longer just a planet. It was a partner in discovery, and humanity had only just begun to explore its potential.